We are in the book of Hebrews. We're continuing in chapter 11, and as we made mention, chapter 11 is going to take us more time than other chapters because we're dealing with so many examples, so many people, so many things, and it's all brought in to teach what actually the book of Hebrews started. It was a subject started not in chapter 11, but started in chapter 10, really in verse 22. In chapter 10, verse 22, it says, "Let us draw near with a true heart in full assurance of faith, having our hearts sprinkled from an evil conscience and our bodies washed with pure water. Let us hold fast the confession of our hope without wavering, for he who promised is faithful," which is what the writer is going to bring out by way of examples by 18 different people, plus some that is not giving us any names, just the actions. And some of them we can easily guess. Some of them would be way too many to know the actual number. And sometimes it's Israel itself. But by way of example, and as we have made mention, and we'll mention it again, Hebrews does teach and does show that the Bible will teach by direct command. That's just cut and dry statements. You will do this, you will not do this. It also will teach by way of example, both approved and disapproved. And it will teach by way of implication. And it shows us what was implied. And it shows us, or I should say, to use the proper word, what was inferred. And then the recipient of that finding the implication that was there. And we'll get to that with Abraham in this. Now, we've already gone through Abel, Enoch, Noah, and the first part of Abraham. And Abraham is actually done in 3 sections. And Abraham is given more space in Hebrews 11 than anybody else. Moses gets a good amount, but most are given just basically a sentence, and some we're not even given their names, just the actions that they did. But every one of them reflect what we just read from Hebrews 10, 22 and 23. We'll just read 23. "Let us hold fast the confession of our hope without wavering, for he who promised is faithful." And that is a theme that we find throughout the book. That God makes promises, and in 3 instances in the book of Hebrews, he actually swears. He makes an oath, and he's going to keep that oath. Now, he could have done it without an oath and still kept the promise. But to show the absolute assurance of it, he gave an oath. And with no higher oath than one could give, he gave concerning himself. And now we come to chapter 11. We've covered the first part of Abraham. Then it takes a break to Sarah. And then we go to one verse, verse 12, also concerning Abraham. Then, this is where we left off, we come to verse 13. Verse 13 is another break, and then we'll go back to Abraham, but this is another break, verses 13 to 16, and it's giving a summation of all those it's discussed thus far, plus those it's about to discuss, because the ones it's about to discuss fall into the same category. They're all together. They're all the faithful. They have a faith, and they show the substance of that faith by what they did. Every one of them are doing it. Whether it is Noah with the saving of his house by building an ark, or whether it is Enoch who walked with God, or whether it is Abraham who left his home country, left his people, and followed God, not knowing where he was going. He's following God, and there are promises given to all of them, and God is going to keep his promises. Now, the examples are here for a very good reason, and it is defining biblical faith. I will tell you a story. I don't know that I've ever told you this story before. Maybe I have, maybe I haven't, but it's been a few years ago now. It was on a Friday night, about 10:30. My phone rang, and anyone who's calling the building, they're actually getting my cell phone. And so I always answer the phone if I can. I mean, there are times when I can't, but I'll answer the phone. So this is 10:30 at night. I answer the phone, and it's a fella who's actually surprised that anyone answered the phone. He expected a answering machine. Okay, and this man is from Haines City, Florida, which I know where Haines City is. And it was his life's mission, as he told me, it was his life's mission to call every Church of Christ preacher in the States to tell them that baptism is not essential for salvation. Okay. And he's going alphabetically. And he said, I'm still in Alabama. And I thought, you're Alabama? You're calling Georgia. And he said, he was still he said, do you know how many churches there are in Alabama? I said, I know there are a lot. No, I can't answer that question. But he was still on Alabama. Well, there's several states between A and G. And I thought, I could have lived my whole life without talking to this man. That would have been okay. But so for some reason, he decided to call here. He broke he broke whatever system he had going, and so we have a long conversation. And what really, there were several things that were bizarre about the man. One is that after we'd been speaking for about an hour and a half, he said, "Oh, it's getting late," and I thought, "I didn't call you, you called me," and but. We were discussing things, and he was saying, you don't believe certain scriptures. And I was trying to tell him, yes, I do. Yes, I believe these scriptures are valid. But you can't take these scriptures alone. You've got to put the total teaching of the Bible together. And I said, let's go to James. And he scoffs, and he says, they always go to James. And I said, well, what's wrong with James? And we read what's in James chapter 2, of which he was very familiar with. Obviously, he was very familiar with. Now, here's the thing, is that he was saying there were certain scriptures I was just tossing out, and I wasn't tossing them out at all, but he's tossing out an entire book. He's tossing out the entire book of James. Here is the next thing, is that Hebrews, you might as well toss out Hebrews too, Hebrews as well, I should say, because Hebrews is saying the same thing, just in different wording. Instead of the wording that James uses, which really, from Hebrews chapter 11 going to James chapter 2, for me, it's only a couple of pages. But thus, verse 17, so James 2, verse 17, thus also faith by itself, if it does not have works, is dead. But some will say, you have faith and I have works. Show me your faith without your works, and I'll show you my works by, I will show you my faith by my works, which is what Hebrews 11 is showing. Not the works of the Hebrews writer, but example after example and all of these are approved examples of people of the past that showed their faith. How? By what they were commanded to do. Now, if this didn't apply to us, this principle of doing what we're commanded to do, why even bring it up? And why say things, as we've already read from Hebrews chapter 10, verse 23, let us hold fast the confession of our hope without wavering, for he who promised is faithful. But also verse 22, let us draw near with a true heart in full assurance of faith, having our hearts sprinkled from an evil conscience and our bodies washed with pure water. Now let's hold fast the confession of our hope. Let's hold fast to that. And this is where the discussion of faith begins, going into chapter 11. Now, let's go to verse 17, I think. No, verse 13 is where we are. We're in Hebrews 11, verse 13. These all died in faith, not having received the promises, but having seen them afar off, were assured of them, embraced them, and confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims on the earth. This is a little section that continues to tell us concerning faith and is a summation of all those that we've talked about thus far, that the writer has mentioned thus far. Abel, Enoch, Noah, Abraham, Sarah. All right. All these died in faith, not having received the promises. What does that mean? That means that was Noah not saved by the ark? Yeah. Okay, so that was a promise that came true. Yeah, that it was fulfilled. But there are more promises still. There are more promises than the ark and surviving the flood. There's more than that. And there's more for Enoch, who, yeah, he walked with God and God took him. There's more than that. There's more than for Abraham and for Sarah. There's more. And they did not see the land promise fulfilled and knew they couldn't. They knew that was going to be in the distant future, because God tells him, your descendants will receive this land. This will be their land. So how long is that going to take? Well, there's no way Abraham could know. But he could very well figure, he and Sarah could very well figure they're not going to live to see it. That'll happen in time, and it did. And it would take centuries after their death for that to take place. But there are greater promises still. And one is that of the Messiah. Another is that of what the Messiah brings, and that's salvation. And also heaven, that city without foundations. City with foundations. And we see actually that in Revelation 21, where the foundation of the walls, there are 12 foundations to the wall of this new Jerusalem. Not the old one. The old one's done away with. This is called the New Jerusalem. It's heaven itself. That will be the eternal home of the righteous. And we have this city. They're looking for that city, of which we will see in just a minute, that heavenly country, which we'll see in just a minute. But going here to Hebrews 10, holding fast the confession of our hope without wavering, for he who promised is faithful. He in fact is faithful. Now 11:13, these all died in faith, not having received the promise, but having seen them afar off, were assured of them, embraced them, and confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims on the earth. Now, confessing that they're strangers and pilgrims on the earth means that the promise that they were looking for is not on this earth. It's not. And the text is about to tell us that it's not. But they see them afar off. They're assured of them. They embrace them. They confess their hope. They confess it. They're strangers and pilgrims on this earth. Yeah, it's their hope that's beyond this earth. That's where their confession lies. They're not just happy to be here and this is all there is. And whatever you get, and you just live your life on this earth and nothing else after that. They embrace them, and there is faith in embracing that. There is faith in confessing that. There is faith in doing what God called them to do. Now we go to verse 14. For those who say such things declare plainly that they seek a homeland. Well, where is that homeland? Is it Israel, physical Israel, here on this earth? It can't be, because he says they're strangers and pilgrims on the earth. They seek a homeland. Verse 15, and truly if they called to mind that country from which they had come out, they would have had opportunity to return. So we could take someone like Sarah and Abraham. If they had thought about life was perhaps better, more convenient, life was settled back in Ur, an urban, is short for urban, no it's not, but in this urban environment, can I tell you a story? It's a funny story. It just occurred to me that years ago, I have to do this. Yeah, I know. It just playing around with that reminded me. I was teaching a high school class, and it's so funny. And we're talking about, we're just doing basic questions. And Abraham, where was Abraham from? And there was one of the teenage girls. She knew it was a 2-letter word, and she reached for the first 2-letter word in her mind, and she said Oz. I couldn't believe it. That's so funny. Yeah, those flying monkeys and those witches, they are, you just got to get away from them. The whole place just erupted because it was funny. No, it's Ur. But if they had thought of returning to Ur as a place to return, they could have. They could have just gone right back to their old life. They could have gone right back and fit right in, and Abraham or Abram and Sarai are back. Okay, that's great. They could have, but they didn't. They considered themselves as strangers, as pilgrims, as just sojourners, just here for a little time, and then they're gone. And there's something greater. There's something greater than some city or some stretch of land or whatever this earth can give us. There's something greater. And there is that confession that they are just here temporarily, and they're declaring that they seek a homeland. And they could have returned. Now we go to verse 16. If they wanted what was on this earth, just what's on this earth, they could have gone back. But now they desire a better, that is, a heavenly country. That's what they desired. Now, we go back to verse 1, Hebrews 11, verse 1. Faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. Faith has a substance. We've already talked about that. And that substance is going to be what someone is confessing, what someone is doing. There is a substance. It's not just something that's kind of abstract and never has any evidence or never has anything that's solid about it. There is. It is going to be found in the lives of people and what their faith actually is. It's going to show in what they do and what they believe. It has a substance. Now, if someone has faith in God, faith in the Bible, their actions are going to show it. If someone has faith in Darwin, faith in evolution, faith in all of, just name whatever else is out in the world, then it's going to show by their actions. And their whole view of reality will be different, but their actions will be different as well. It's going to reflect that, and it's going to have a substance to it. Now, we go back to verse 16. They desire a better, that is, a heavenly country. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for He has prepared a city for them. Now, verse 10 already mentions that. For He waited for a city which has foundations, whose builder and maker is God. Well, who is that? That's Abraham. Abraham, there's a better place than any place on this earth. There's some beautiful places on this earth. There's no doubt about that. But no matter where you live, there's going to be something that's going to show this place is a place of mortality. This place is a place where there is sadness, there are diseases, there's death, there is decay, there is corruption, that no matter where you go, no matter how beautiful it may be, it's going to let you down. This earth is going to let you down and eventually let you down in a grave. But God doesn't let us down. and heaven will not let us down. But it requires us being faithful to Him. Now, we have this city that He says was prepared for them. Now, He's also going to say that it's prepared, and obviously it's prepared for us, but He's going to say it. Obviously, it's prepared for us. Otherwise, why even mention it? It would be rather cruel to say, yeah, all of these people, they have access to heaven, but yeah, y'all are born out of time. Y'all are born at the wrong place, wrong time, wrong everything. You can never obtain it. Why even mention it at all? All right? But it is a principle being shown by way of example and things that are implied by these examples and things that are spoken directly. Now, we go to verse 17, and verse 17 takes us back to Abraham again. By faith, Abraham, when he was tested, offered up Isaac, and he who had received the promises offered up his only begotten son, of whom it was said, "In Isaac your seed shall be called." Now, Genesis chapter 22 is that of where Abraham is told what to do. Let's just go there. First off, let's go to Genesis chapter 21. Let's go to Genesis chapter 21 and verse 12. Genesis 21, verse 12. We'll come back to Hebrews in just a second, but we need to look at this. But God said to Abraham, "Do not let it be displeasing in your sight because of the lad or because of the bondwoman." Okay, that concerns Hagar and Ishmael. Ishmael is his son. Hagar is not his wife. Hagar is not Sarah. She is the handmaid of Sarah. "Whatever Sarah has said to you, listen to her voice, for in Isaac your seed shall be called. Yet I will also make a nation of the son of the bondwoman, because he is your seed." Now he says he's going to do this, and he did. He did do that. That has been fulfilled. But he said, "In Isaac your seed shall be called." Okay, now Abraham can know some things, and the book of Hebrews is going to show us what he knew. But here is faith. We come to chapter 22. Chapter 22. We begin in verse 1. "Now it came to pass after these things that God tested Abraham and said to him, 'Abraham,' and he said, 'Here I am.' Then he said, 'Take now your son, your only son, Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains of which I shall tell you.'" Okay, that's out of nowhere. This is a test. All right, Isaac, he just had to see Ishmael leave. Things were not working at home. Okay, and so Ishmael is not the one of promise. That's the one Sarah tried to take things into her own hands. She comes with an idea of how to help God. You don't have to help God at all. He doesn't need our help. When He's going to do something, He's going to do it however He's going to do it. And He doesn't need us with our cleverness to say, okay, well, this isn't going to work the way He said, so I've got another way, we can try it. That never works. That never works. And it didn't work. But now He's called to take Isaac and what? Go to the land of Moriah and offer him up there as a burnt offering. Well, if He's going to do that, that means Isaac's got to die. That's exactly what that means. You can't have a burnt offering where the offering doesn't die. That doesn't happen. So Abraham rose early in the morning. He doesn't wait. Here truly is faith. So Abraham rose early in the morning and saddled his donkey and took 2 of his young men with him and Isaac his son, and he split the wood for the burnt offering and rose and went to the place which God had told him. So he's already got it settled in his mind. He has it settled. Why? Because he knows what God told him in chapter 21. Chapter 21 and 12. In Isaac your seed shall be called. Isaac is not old enough to have children. Isaac isn't even married. Isaac is a child at this point. If Isaac is going to be killed as a burnt offering to God, Abraham knows one way or another they're both coming down off that mountain. He knows it. And he's going to do what God called him to do. And he does not ask for explanation. At least it's not here. And he doesn't delay. He rises early in the morning. He doesn't delay. It's okay. That's what I've been told to do. And he went to the place which God had told him. Now we go to verse 4. Then on the third day Abraham lifted his eyes and saw the place afar off. And Abraham said to his young men, "Stay here with the donkey. The lad and I will go yonder and worship, and we will come back to you." He doesn't need to explain this to his men, and he doesn't need to explain it to Isaac. All right? Because he will get resistance, or he will get discouragement from those men and a confused Isaac. All right? And so he doesn't need to tell them what's about to happen. That they're just going to go, you stay here, and he's not going to tell Isaac what's happening. And he's not going to tell his men what's happening. I will go yonder and worship, and we will come back. Look at this. We will come back to you. Now, I don't think this is a ruse. I don't think he's lying. I think he fully well understands we will come back to you. Now, he's not going to tell them what's going to happen in between when he's up on the mountain, but he has the faith to say, we will come back to you. So Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it on Isaac his son. And he took the fire in his hand and a knife, and the two of them went together. But Isaac spoke to Abraham his father and said, "My father." And he said, "Here I am, my son." Then he said, "Look, the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering?" Now, Isaac knows that there's got to be a lamb. He knows that something's missing here. And Abraham said, "My son, God will provide for himself the lamb for a burnt offering." So the two of them went together. Okay, that's good enough for me. God's going to offer it. God's going to provide. All right, and of course, all of this is foreshadowing of the cross. Although the cross is not involved here, this is all foreshadowing. As a matter of fact, it's in the same region. It's in the same area of where Christ would be crucified. I'm not going to say it's the exact same spot because I can't prove that. But it's the same area. So the two of them went together. Then they came to the place which God had told him, and Abraham built an altar there and placed the wood in order, and he bound Isaac his son and laid him on the altar upon the wood. So, all right, he binds up Isaac and puts him on the wood. And Abraham stretched out his hand and took the knife to slay his son. He's going to do it because God told him to do it. But he knows one way or another, Isaac lives. He doesn't really know. He's got an idea of what's going to happen, but he knows one thing. In your son Isaac, your seed shall be called. In Isaac, your seed shall be called. Isaac has no children. So something's got to happen here. Something's got to happen. And this is faith. And it is an understanding that Isaac can't die until he has at least a child. All right? He can't die until he has at least one descendant. Isaac's life is going to be spared until he gets to at least that point, and then there is no promise of an extended life after that. Now he's going to get it, but there is no assurance after that. So Abraham, he takes the knife, verse 11, but the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. So he said, Here I am. And he said, Do not lay your hand on the lad or do anything to him, for now I know that you fear God, since you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. Then Abraham lifted his eyes and looked, and there behind him was a ram caught in the thicket by its horns. So Abraham went and took the ram and offered it for a burnt offering instead of his son. And Abraham called the name of the place, The Lord will provide, as it is said to this day, in the mount of the Lord it shall be provided. Yes, now we'll just say this briefly. The Lord will provide. He does provide that lamb, and in time it would be His only son dying there on a cross. And here is Abraham being tested. Now, we don't know everything in Abraham's mind from Genesis, but the book of Hebrews does tell us, and this is him inferring, this is Abraham using inference to come to a conclusion. So we're back to Hebrews chapter 11, and this is a powerful way in which the Bible teaches. Very powerful way of where it will show us something in one book, let's say Genesis, and then giving us more information about it later, like in Hebrews, giving us more information of what was going on, a little bit more detail, a little bit more of an explanation, something else that is given in this, and it's all from the Holy Spirit. And you can know this is precisely what happened. This is precisely, in this case, this is precisely what was in the mind of Abraham. Now, we go to Hebrews 11, verse 17 again. By faith, Abraham, when he was tested, offered up Isaac, and he who received the promises offered up his only begotten son. Well, one of the promises comes in next, verse 18, of whom it was said, in Isaac your seed shall be called. Concluding, he makes a conclusion because God doesn't say this directly. Abraham had to conclude it, that God was able to raise him up, that's Isaac, raise Isaac up even from the dead, from which he also received him in a figurative sense. Concluding, you mean we have to take scriptures and conclude from them? That something can be inferred and we can conclude from them? And the answer is yes. We most certainly can do that, and that is precisely what we are called to do. There in the book of Jeremiah, there is an Ethiopian who befriends Jeremiah. He is a righteous man. His name is Ebed-Melech. Okay, Ebed-Melech is told that yes, there's going to be an attack on this city. It's going to be the Babylonians, and that he himself, Ebed-Melech, will not be harmed. He will not be harmed. And from that, he could, now I don't know what he did when the Babylonians came, but it's going to be like he is like, not that he is, but like he's just invisible to the Babylonians. Like they don't care about him. They're not going to bother with him. He can, and if he wanted to, we have no sense that he did. If he wanted to, he could have just wandered all through the city, just watching the sights. I don't know why you'd want to do that, but he could have and not been harmed because God gave the assurance he will not be harmed, and he wasn't. Now, he could have spent the entire time in an alleyway somewhere behind some barrels. He could have done that and still spared. Or he could have just walked freely wherever he wanted to go, and he would not be harmed because God said he wouldn't be harmed. He wouldn't be. And here is now that is, with that message, that is a thing that you'd have to take on faith, to where while it's bothersome and horrid what is occurring around in Jerusalem, while it's being taken by the Babylonians, I know that I see tomorrow, and I know that I survive all this. I know that because God told me directly. And so will Jeremiah, as a matter of fact. Jeremiah would not be killed in that. There would be many who were killed in that. Now we come back to Abraham. Abraham concluding, because of the promise, and God is going to keep his promise, that Isaac would not be the end of Isaac. That would not be the end. That he's concluding that should he kill him, which he's about to do, he's in the process, bound Isaac, put him on the wood, took out his knife, and then he's stopped before he can go any further. He concludes that God would raise him from the dead, knowing that God could do it. And that God would have to spare the lad, would have to spare Isaac for the promise to be fulfilled. Because when he says, in Isaac your seed shall be called, that's not a hypothetical Isaac, nor is a metaphorical Isaac. It is that boy right there. Him. And that is precisely what God meant by it, and Abraham is able to make a proper conclusion. Now, we'll go through the next bit more rapidly, because we actually have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have 5 people who are mentioned in the next 4 verses. In verse 23, we're not given their names, but we know their names. It's the parents of Moses. It's Amram and Jochebed. We know their names, but it's just going to, it's his parents. It's the faith of Moses' parents. Then we will get to the faith of Moses. But by faith, Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau concerning things to come. And Isaac is going to be an old man when he does it. He's going to bless Jacob and Esau, these twin brothers, and Jacob is the one that's going to receive the greater blessing than Esau. Esau really, concerning his birthright, it meant nothing to him. Esau was someone that didn't think too far ahead, didn't consider anything spiritually. Obviously, he didn't. And he was willing to sell his birthright as payment for lunch or supper. Now that was it. All right, he thinks he's going to die. Perhaps he was. I'd rather doubt it, but perhaps he was. But he was willing to sell it for just basically a bowl of lentils, is what it comes down to. And that is we see where, let's just go to chapter 12 in verse 16. Chapter 12, verse 16. Lest there be any fornicator or profane person like Esau, who for one morsel of food sold his birthright. For you know that afterward, when he wanted to inherit the blessings, he was rejected, for he found no place for repentance, though he sought it diligently with tears. There are some things that you can throw away and you never get back. You can throw it away and you will never get it back. The birthright is one of those things. And he basically saw it as something that was of no worth, really. And it wasn't very valuable to him. Now, let's go to verse 21. So Hebrews 11, verse 21. That was Isaac. Now, we don't have by faith Esau. That's not the next verse. We don't have a by faith Esau. By faith Jacob. So this is years down the line. By faith Jacob, when he was dying, blessed each of the sons of Joseph and worshiped, leaning on the top of his staff. He's in Egypt now. He is a very old man. And he sees the grandsons he never thought could even exist. He sees the son he thought had been dead for years, because that was a ruse that had been played on him. And he lived years of his life thinking that Joseph was dead, and Joseph wasn't dead. Joseph was going through some hard times. Then he finds himself in a position, God works in amazing ways, finds himself to Joseph of being able to save his own family, even those who sold him into slavery. He is able to save his own family in a time of deep drought, of 7 years, a famine, of extraordinary famine. It's going to be 7 years of famine, and he is in a position to save them. And here we have Jacob blessing the sons of Joseph, and he's worshiping, leaning on his staff. And he's an old man at that time. And then we come to Joseph. So we go from Abraham to Isaac to Jacob to Joseph. And a great deal of the book of Genesis is given to Joseph. Now, the Messiah is not going to come through the line of Joseph. That's Ephraim, the tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh. He's going to be given a double portion. He's going to have 2 tribes, really. If there was a tribe of Joseph, named Joseph, it would be the combination of Ephraim and Manasseh. But they're enormous tribes, and so there are 2 of them. And these are the 2 sons of Joseph. And Joseph, by faith, so we get to Jacob, now verse 22 to Joseph. By faith, Joseph, when he was dying, made mention of the departure of the children of Israel and gave instruction concerning his bones. So this is Genesis chapter 50, Genesis 50, and the end of the book of Genesis. And the book of Genesis ends with the children of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, now inside Egypt. And they have very gracious hosts who know what Joseph did. And they have extraordinary gratitude at that time for what Joseph did for them. And of course, it's God who it's Jehovah who did it, but through Joseph. And in this, Joseph makes mention of a promise that he thoroughly believed, and he knew he wouldn't see it. He's coming to the end of his days. He knew he wouldn't see it. But he says, when you leave out of here, you're going to take my bones. Take them. And because he didn't want to stay there. Not that it really mattered. I mean, it doesn't really matter. But to him, he didn't want his body, he didn't want his bones to remain in Egypt. Take them out. Take them out with you. And it does show that he had faith. He had faith that they were going to receive the land promised. It was promised. We read it where we just read it actually in our Sunday morning with the life of Abraham. That land of the Canaanites was promised to the descendants of Abraham. And here Joseph is talking to those descendants of which he is one, those descendants of Abraham, that when you leave, because he knew in time, when you leave, it's going to be about 400 something years, when you leave, take my bones. And it wouldn't be until we get to the days of Moses being 80 years old, that that's going to take place. And Israel, in fact, just to bring this fact in, Israel did, when they were leaving, they took his bones. Whatever tomb it was in, they took his bones. And you can know that when they have done that, they're not coming back. And they know they're not coming back. When they take his bones, they know where they're headed. And that does show a faith on their part. Now, Israel wasn't always faithful. Israel, once they get into the desert, they go hot and cold, hot and cold, hot and cold. And I don't know why we do that, and I'm talking about humanity, but we do. We can do it on a personal level, and they can do it on a mass level. Now let's do verse 23, and then we'll call it for today. Verse 23, by faith, Moses. So this isn't Moses' faith, it's his parents. By faith, someone's faith, Moses, when he was born, was hidden 3 months by, who's the someone? His parents. All right, that's Amram and Jochebed. Because they saw he was a beautiful child, and they were, here's the important part, not afraid of the king's command. They're not afraid. Well, there was a Pharaoh that arose in Egypt who did not remember Joseph. He didn't regard Joseph. That's ancient history. Who cares about Joseph? He doesn't care. And he just wanted, actually, I think he would be someone who would want to rewrite history of where Joseph doesn't even exist, of which has happened numerous times in history. Numerous times of where someone wants to erase history. They want to erase and that's why they would go and destroy statues. Not a new thing, by the way. They would go and they would destroy historical documents, whether it is if it is to chip them away or to burn them. They would do things like that. And here is someone who this Pharaoh brings out a command. All right, Israel's becoming too numerous, so every male child born must die. And you have the parents of Moses. They're not going to follow that. They're not going to follow that at all. And it is by their faith that Moses is hidden. And then now we come to verse 24, and this will be concerning Moses' faith in time. So that's as far as we can get for today. I appreciate everyone being with us, and hope we can continue next week. Thank you, everybody.